Hi, my name is Nikisha Randolph, and I'm a mental health counselor. I'd like to welcome you to today's session on the empty chair, managing grief and loss. We all know that when it comes to discussing grief and loss, death and dying, it's a really uncomfortable subject, especially if you are still in the grieving process. So please feel free at any point during this presentation to pause, take a break, and then once you have gathered yourself and are ready to return to the session, you can do so at your own pace. If you do have any additional questions, the very last slide of my presentation has my contact information, and I would be more than happy to speak with you. In addition, I know that since COVID-19, we have lost so many individuals, loved ones, colleagues in our district, mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, children. And so I think it is befitting, and not only to recognize and honor them in our minds for just a brief moment, to be mindful of them, but for anyone that we've lost in our lives, I'd like for us just to take a moment to pause for a moment of silence in their honor. I want you just take a moment. You can close your eyes if you'd like, however you want to do it, but let's just pause in honor of those who are a part of us, who have been affected by death, our family members who are still struggling with grieving, and obviously, as I mentioned before, those who have already transitioned for any number of reasons. Thank you. So grief is a natural response to loss, right? It's the emotional suffering you feel when something or someone you love is taken away. Often the pain of loss can feel overwhelming. You may not experience all kinds of difficult and unexpected emotions. You may feel all kinds of difficult and uncomfortable emotions unexpectedly. Shock, anger, disbelief, guilt, and profound sadness. The pain of grief can also disrupt your physical health, making it difficult to sleep, eat, or even concentrate. These are normal reactions to loss, and the more significant the loss, the more intense your grief will be. So why the empty chair? Really, in counseling, the empty chair is a technique that we use with clients who are grieving the loss of someone. What we normally do is we have an empty chair and we may ask the client to bring in something that reminds them of that person. Maybe it's an old shirt or a baseball cap, or if it's a child, a toy. And we allow the facilitation of a discussion with that person as if though they were sitting in the empty chair. Maybe that conversation involves closure. Maybe that conversation involves what I meant to tell you before you left. That conversation can involve anything. And really what it is it's not that the person actually is in their mind is saying, okay, that person is there. But this conversation is really for the person who's on the other side of the empty chair. And I feel right now that we're living in a day and a time where we are all on the other side of the empty chair because we've experienced so much loss. We've experienced loss in our school district with our colleagues, with mothers and fathers and children and aunts and uncles and grandparents, and just humanity in itself. People have died from COVID-19, other natural causes or terminal illnesses, or even unexpected incidences. So how do we deal with that? How do we deal with the grief and the time that we're living in? Well, there's Rando's 6 tasks of grieving. Mostly when we think about death and dying, we think about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 different stages of grief, which involve denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. But today we're going to deal with recognizing, reacting, recollecting, relinquishing, readjusting, and reinvesting. The first thing that's really important, an important part of the process of grief, is acknowledging your feelings, that recognition, acknowledging your feelings, and that your feelings are valid. When someone is taken away from us, a loved one is taken away from us, all sorts of emotions happen for us. And to be quite honest with you, no emotion is wrong. No one is expecting you to always be strong. No one is expecting you not to cry. No one is expecting you not to show your emotions. But it's really important to acknowledge those feelings. If someone is asking how you're doing, and if you're not doing okay, it is completely fine to say, I'm not doing okay. I know sometimes when loss happens, people tend to ask us questions like, are you okay? No, of course I'm not okay. I just lost someone. But then some of us, who are used to being strong and resilient may say, no, I'm okay. I'm making it. I'm doing okay. And if that's truly how you're feeling, then that's an okay response. That's completely fine. But if you're not doing okay, acknowledge those feelings. If you are not in the mood for planning or for visitors, it's completely okay to say, I'm not okay. I'm not in the mood. I would like to be alone right now or for a couple of hours just to kind of gather myself. But again, in the moment and in the stillness of understanding that, wow, someone has been taken away from me, please acknowledge the fact that you are human and that all the emotions that you are feeling are normal. They are absolutely positively normal. A lot of times grief presents in different ways. And by present, I mean it shows up in different ways when we are grieving. For some people, it might show up as they feel burned out. They may be on a job, or they may be still going to church as usual and, still practicing their faith. But after a while, it kind of feels like, you know what, I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. That's a good indicator to you to let you know that grief is still present in your life. If you're feeling burnt out after someone has passed away. Sometimes there are regressive feelings. So for someone who had a really bad habit prior and they've lost someone, you yourself, or you may see in other people that they regress back to that habit as a way of coping with the grief that they are experiencing. For our students, we see sometimes behavioral changes, sometimes an increase of negative behaviors inside of the classroom setting after they've lost a parent or a loved one or someone who was raising them. You'll see different behavioral challenges and changes, and it's almost as if though they have a silent scream and they're crying out for help, but it's demonstrated through their behaviors. Anxiety and depression isn't on here, but anxiety and depression become heightened. And a part of the depression is the loss of interest in activities, the feelings of sadness and hopelessness. The anxiety is the worrying, like what happened? I want to know all the details of what happened. I can't stop thinking about them. And, I can't stop thinking about the fact that I never got an opportunity to say goodbye. Those are some of the thoughts that might come up with anxiety and depression. Also, changes in the personality. You may have had people say to you, you know what? I noticed that there's a change. You used to be so bright and bubbly. Like, what happened? All of a sudden, you seem mean. You don't want to be bothered. You're avoiding people, and you're very short with your answers. A change in a personality is definitely a sign that grief is still present. Obviously, it changes us when someone is taken from us and someone is no longer here with us. It absolutely changes who we are, especially if we are very, very close with them. And even sometimes indirectly, if things happen on a national or international level where there are multiple casualties, it can change who we are. Sometimes that's for the better in that it grounds us and makes us more grateful for being alive and making us more grateful for the things that we do have and the people who are still with us. And sometimes that changes for the bad, especially if we start to demonstrate negative behaviors. Another R is reacting. Sometimes when we find out that someone has died or has lost their life, we can't articulate the feeling, right? It's hard for us to use the correct language to really describe how we are feeling. And sometimes even the first emotion that we experience is anger. I'd like to tell you a really short story. My sister died 19 years ago, hours after she delivered her daughter, who's still alive and well. Savannah is an amazing young woman. She's 19. And I was in Charlotte, North Carolina when this happened. Well, I didn't have my phone with me. I was at a conference, a church conference. And so my sister had died, and it was probably about 10 or 11 hours before I was back with my phone at the hotel room, and I found out that she died. I got to my room, had a bunch of missed calls on my phone. I was calling everyone. No one was returning my call. And then finally I reached my grandma, and she said to me, I said, "Hey," we called her Mother. I said, "Hey, Mother, what's going on? I'm getting all these calls, but no one is answering the phone." And she says to me, "May died." And so, and even now it brings back those emotions. I'm reacting to the feeling of hearing that my sister had passed away. And so my first emotion wasn't necessarily anger. It was like, what? I just saw her the day before and she was fine. She was okay. I mean, what happened? How did it happen? Wanting to know. And I was in complete disbelief of the news. I was like, surely my grandmother doesn't know what she's talking about. But then, I realized and I recognized what I was feeling. I recognized what she was saying to me, and that my reaction now was, oh my gosh, a piece of me is completely gone. It has been snatched away from me before I could even say goodbye, I love you. So our reactions when we experience grief sometimes may not necessarily be translatable in just our English language. Sometimes it is our behavior. It is our behavior of crying or screaming or throwing something or, just expressing ourselves as that shock, rings through our life. And our reaction to it is not wrong. You're going to hear me say that a lot. You're not wrong for how you feel. You're not wrong for how you react. It is a part of life. And regardless of, I know some people call it expected death, or if it's an expected, the doctors have given a loved one a prognosis, or even if it's unexpected or a sudden death, I don't care. You still experience grief. You still experience all the normal emotions that anyone who has now lost someone experiences. And so just remember that. Remember that you're still going to experience it, regardless if it's something that is expected or unexpected, that your recognition of your feelings and reacting to it is completely normal. So emotional processing differences, everyone is going to process grief in a very different way, even though we're all going to start off kind of with those baseline emotions of sadness. You're going to feel sadness once you've lost someone. The process of grief, itself can be unfamiliar and scary. I don't care how many times People say, oh, well, you experienced that before. Every time is a new time. Every incident is new and can be new. It's really hard sometimes for me to understand how people can say, oh, you should be familiar with that. You should be okay with that. Someone else has said, I could never get familiar with the idea that people who are closest to me, that I love and that I cherish, that they're just gone. And so that I'm okay with it. I'm fine. I'm going about my business and I'm not even acknowledging my feelings and how I feel about the fact that they're not there. Sometimes it's important, even when we are dealing with grief, that after we've acknowledged our feelings, we've reacted to them, that we try to, in some way, shape, or form, when it's time, and the timing of grief is different. Like the different stages and timing that I might go through with grief would be different for you. But when you feel it's time to start reestablishing norms and parameters, it is completely up to you. It is completely up to you when that actually happens. When that process happens for you, it's fine. You don't need to say, okay, it's only been 2 days now. I need to go back to work. Now I need to go back to school. Now I need to. No, absolutely not. When you feel in your body, in your heart, and in your mind, it's right, that's the time for you to start reestablishing your norms. And it's not the norms of just, oh, they're dying and I need to move on. No, it's about now it's a new world. Let's look at it differently. Let's reframe it. It is a new world that they may not be in, but that they may not be in physically, but it's a new world that they are in my heart. When I work with students who have lost a loved one, I always tell them to put their hand over their heart. Let's see my hand over my heart. And I tell them that in the new world that you're living in, things are going to change. Things are going to be completely different. But anytime you want to remember that loved one who's gone on, put your hand over your heart and know that they're there. That's the one thing that you can control. That's the one thing that you can be mindful of, that they are in your heart. And I say the same thing to you. Remember that they are there and that you're going to have to establish and reestablish new things because they're not a part of your everyday physically anymore, but they are always going to be with you in your heart and in your mind. So recollecting and re-experiencing, it could be difficult for an individual to work through until concerns about their daily life until concerns regarding their daily life has been affected, have been processed. So in other words, when you're recollecting yourself and recollecting your thoughts and recollecting your life and then starting to re-experience things without the person, that's going to be a little challenging to process. That's going to be a little challenging to process because it's a different, as I mentioned before, it's a different world that you are living in. But because it's hard, it does not mean that it's going to be impossible for you to recollect and to re-experience. Just remember, you got to acknowledge those feelings. How are you feeling? No one is going to be able to do that for you. And the more you acknowledge how you are feeling, and the more you acknowledge how you're reacting to situations, it's going to be a little bit easier for you to process your daily life by by recollection and re-experiencing. And recollection can also be about, as we talk about the empty chair, and we're sitting across from that empty chair, and that empty chair in our minds, in our homes, the physical chair that maybe they sat in. Let's recollect those great memories that we have of them and that we shared with them. Also, with recollecting and re-experiencing, it's important to examine our fear of not being able to fix individuals or even our own feelings. Really important point. Grief is not a situation that's easily fixable. We can't get Gorilla Glue and put it on our hearts and piece our hearts back together. It's okay to acknowledge even when we feel fearful because, we don't know what's going to happen or if something's going to happen to us. And sometimes when people die and we've lost a lot of people, it does put us in the mindset of, am I going to be next? Is something going to happen to me? And if you're feeling that, again, acknowledge it. But whatever you do, don't try to say, I'm going to fix someone who is grieving by hurrying along their feelings. And certainly don't do the same for yourself. Don't try to hurry along your feelings. Yes, they're going to be a roller coaster. Some days you're going to be up and some days you're going to be down. But whatever you do, please, please, please allow the process to take its place. Relinquishing. Relinquishing can be very difficult depending on what stage you are in, because relinquishing is letting go of negative emotions as well as letting go of feelings that this person is no longer here with me. How do I let go of the negative emotions associated with the loss? But then also, how do I start moving on knowing that that person is not here with me anymore? How do I not blame myself and say, oh, it's my fault? Oh, had I done this differently, maybe they would have still been alive. How do we let go of those thoughts and those processes that sometimes when we are grieving, it torments our mind over and over and over again? If I had just been home, if I had just gotten back 5 minutes earlier, if I had just paid more attention to the signs, then this person would have still been here. We have to show ourselves kindness and grace. We can't hold ourselves accountable for not being able to save someone's life. We can't do that. Because guess what? That's not grieving, that's staying stuck. Grief is a process that happens over a period of time. When you get in the mindset of it's my fault, that means that you're stuck in one spot and that you're not grieving and that your mind is being almost kind of tortured by the fact that I blame myself for this. And if you're feeling that or have felt that, or if you ever experienced that in the future where you were stuck on that, that's the time where you need to get help, that you need to seek professional help so that you can be able to move beyond that and to relinquish that feeling. So then let's talk a little bit about readjustment. So readjustment means that you may have a lack of support, you may need help with building new skills and understanding new assumptions about your world, the new world that you're in. Readjusting takes time. And again, readjusting is kind of like the recollection period and some of the other points that I've hit on that you have to, or points that I've made, that when it is the right time for you to start making readjustments and rebuilding your world, knowing that the person is no longer with you on earth, then you will know when that time happens. But there's going to be a time where things have to be readjusted. And that's not to say, when I say things like readjustment, it doesn't mean I forget about the person and I'm moving on, I'm done, I'm just going to start my life over, and that I need to forget about their existence. That's not it at all. It means that I'm developing new assumptions of what a new world looks like for me without them being in it physically, and I have to adjust to that. I have to adjust to coming home and they're not there. I have to adjust to going to work and they are not there. I have to adjust to a whole new environment, which may be a struggle because that person is no longer in my environment and in my life physically. So how do you How do we support reinvestment in ourselves and for others? Build emotional connections with other people. Healthy emotional connections, because sometimes when we're grieving, like I said earlier, we can go back to a regressive state in life, and maybe sometimes that regressive state is not a good one, not good memories, not good habits. So if you could build emotional connections even with your family members, the ones that are still there, that's important. Find things to do that are meaningful, activities to be involved with, positive distractions to kind of help you to take your mind off of the heaviness that comes with grief. You know, continue to explore ideas of identity, spirituality, your purpose. That's sometimes grief situates us in a place of understanding what now maybe I need to understand my purpose. Why am I here on earth? What am I supposed to be doing? Is there a higher being? And if so, how can I be more connected? Or how can I be one within myself? How can I understand the meaning of my life and mindfulness? How can I, start exploring who I am as a person? And if the goals and the ideas that I want that I'm accomplishing, sometimes it helps us to situate ourselves in a framework where we're thinking about our future, we're thinking about ourselves. We've already mentioned acknowledging your pain. Accept that grief can trigger different emotions and unexpected emotions. It could be a year, or I'll use myself as an example. It's been 19 years and I told that story about losing my sister. That was unexpected. I knew I was doing this presentation. It was completely unexpected that, tears were kind of well a little bit in my eyes and my voice was cracking, and I started to kind of relive where I was in my mind as I was talking to you. Unexpected. So it's going to happen. Expect that those things are going to happen in the most unexpected ways. You could be reading a magazine and, a picture or something can come up that would remind you of that person, or, something's, you could walk by someone and a cologne or a perfume that someone is wearing, a whiff of that can remind you of the person that you lost. So kind of expect that those things may happen and your grief can be triggered at any time. You want to support yourself emotionally by taking care of yourself physically. I always say that mental health is just as important as physical health. Do things that are going to take care of yourself. Visit your doctor, get a physical, make sure that your physical health is okay. Speak to someone. It could be a therapist, it could be a trusted friend, it could be, someone who you can really count on to make sure and to be an accountability partner almost to you, to make sure that emotionally you're doing okay as well as physically. So the commandments of feelings. Number one, they are value neutral. Feelings are impartial. I mean, it doesn't matter. As I mentioned before, we can be triggered by anything at any point in time when we're grieving. They are transitory. When you are grieving, you are going through different transitions. You're going through different processes. You're going through different emotions. Feelings are signals, they're not problems. So when I feel sad, it's not that I have a problem. It doesn't even mean that I necessarily have a mental illness or something. I am grieving. My body is signaling to me that something is happening. It's kind of like, warning, 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 something is going on for you. Something is happening inside of me. It's not that it is a problem or I'm a problem, but it is signaling something to me. It is warning me. It's showing me red flags that, my feelings are not in a positive, balanced state. Number 4 says they may cause feelings in others that still does not make them problems. Even if my crying makes you cry, or even if my sadness makes you sad and you've already kind of moved on, you're a few steps ahead of me, that still doesn't mean, or it doesn't mean that my feelings are invalid, nor does it mean that your feelings are invalid or that they're problems. It is just a part of that process, Let's be easy on ourselves here. This is not the easiest time that we're living in, and no matter how someone leaves us or transitions on, it's never going to be easy. Number 5 says, take the time that you need, and understand that it cannot be rushed. The process of grieving cannot be rushed. Take all the time that you need to make sure that you are okay. So what is on the other side of grief for you? Let's take a moment just to reflect. Let's take a moment to be still and to think about the other side of grief. Is it happiness? Is it still being able to live a life that is meaningful while still honoring the person who left? Does it mean that there is no life out on the other side of grief because that person isn't here and you can't see yourself living without them? What does that look like for you? And if you have a pen, pencil, or a sheet of paper, I want you to jot that down for a moment. What is on the other side of grief for you? I'll share with you what was on the other side of grief for me. Hope. Because we were so blessed with raising an amazing little girl, Savannah McKenzie. And so while it still hurts to this day, while I still have not gotten any of my questions answered as to why so soon, why so sudden, why? All these whys that we always ask, the whys that we're looking at the empty chair and we're saying, why is that person not there? What happened? I know, and I am at a place of peace in knowing that we have one of the most sweetest, intelligent blessings inside of Savannah McKenzie. And so that was on the other side of my grief for me. And I had to get to the point where I recognized and realized that as devastated and as heartbroken and as life-changing and shattering that was for me and my family, that there was a link that was missing from our family. I had to realize that there was hope on the other side of this grief for me, but I still had to go through my grief. I sought out a counselor. I did everything that I could. I, made sure that I was okay. Any thoughts that I had that were harmful thoughts to me, I made sure that I was telling someone about them. And I was so blessed in knowing that there were people who weren't going to judge me if I told them that I had a thought that, made me feel like I didn't want to be here anymore. And people who supported me in that. And I want to say the same for you. If you're going through the grieving process and you can't even see what's on the other side of grief, that's okay. But while you're going through the grieving process, please know that your life matters, that you matter to me, and that I love you, and you're loved by so many other people. And your life on this earth matters. And for whomever you lost, they would want you to find the meaning in life. They would want you to continue to grieve in a healthy way, but they would want you to readjust your life to them not being here physically, but always holding them in your heart and in your mind and in your soul. So thank you for watching this presentation. I hope that it helped you in some way, shape, or form. There's a little survey that we do have for you just to get feedback. And it's really simple. You can just grab your your phone, open up your camera and place it over this QR code that's on the screen and take the survey. And I would really appreciate your feedback. And as I mentioned before, if you need additional support, I'm here. Listen, y'all, we are living in unprecedented times, and we all need someone. Don't feel like you're going through this alone, that no one cares about you. That is not true. You have colleagues here, you have a superintendent, you have people here who care about you. Even if they don't say it to you every single day, they care about you. Loved ones, children who care about you. And so do I, and so do others in this department. They care about you, and we're here to help you with anything that you need. Thanks again. And again, if you need any help or if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.